So my name's Dan Hurley from Team Michigan. I hope you're enjoying the night. Pretty cool here to see this museum, the factory, the videos, a lot of pride. And I think there's going to be a theme here this evening about Pride Detroit. So our friends at MEC reached out to a couple of us, Brandy Johnson and I, and some others, said, do you have any ideas for someone who could speak to the history and revitalization of Detroit? I reached out to a mutual friend at the Detroit Regional Chamber, and he immediately responded with Jeanette Pierce. Good luck if you can get her. We got her, and we're very pleased that she's with us tonight. Jeanette Pierce is the founder and president of the City Institute, a nationally recognized leader in place-based storytelling and civic engagement. A lifelong resident of Detroit's East Side and a passionate social entrepreneur, Jeanette has dedicated her career to helping people connect more deeply to the places where they live, where they work, where they study. Through the City Institute, she uses data, history, and powerful personal narratives to help residents and stakeholders better understand cities, not just through statistics, but through stories that highlight assets, challenges, and innovation. Since 2005, Jeanette has led more than 150,000 locals and newcomers through experiential learning journeys in Detroit, focusing on small businesses, historic neighborhoods, and policy-informed urban development. Her work has inspired greater investment in communities and helped cities from across the Midwest and beyond apply lessons learned from Detroit's transformation. She brings a unique combination of insight and enthusiasm to every conversation about urban revitalization and civic connection. Tonight, she'll share a presentation entitled Innovation and Inspiration, the Revitalization of Detroit. It's a dynamic look at how Detroit's comeback story offers lessons in community empowerment, intentional development, and the power of narrative to shape policy and place. Please help me welcome Jeanette.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Detroit. Hi, over there. Sorry we got this right here, but I get the post-dinner food coma part, but I promise we'll make it pretty exciting. And then we will have time for questions and answers, questions and conversation after. And we talked a little bit before about what a great group you guys are, and I've learned a little bit more about the work that you do and how big the Midwest actually is. Hello, South Dakota and North Dakota, right? Who knew? But I'm going to try to cover a lot in a short period of time. We're going to talk a little bit about Detroit's history in terms of how we got to the bankruptcy that you might have heard about, how we have invested in downtown and the neighborhoods over the last 10 years to be topping all sorts of lists these days. And then share some lessons learned about how we did that, as well as a little bit around attraction and retention, which is one of my focuses and also something we've been focusing on here in Detroit and I know is of great interest to all of us in the Midwest. So that's a long list for 30 minutes, but let's get started. So as you mentioned, I'm Jeanette Pierce. A couple other details. 160,000 people now on experiential tours. Me and my team for 20 years, I've been doing this work. I started my organization 20 years ago. I grew up in the city. I did go away to college to Grand Rapids, to Aquinas College, a small liberal arts college that gave me a full academic scholarship. So I was like, great, I'm there. And I got a chance to study abroad in Spain, which was a life-changing event. And I was like, wow, this walking places thing is pretty cool. I'm going to take this off, I think. I'm going to talk with my hands too much if I can. There we go. And maybe do this. Can I come up here? Okay. Okay. Hopefully it doesn't make any funny noises. Anyway, so Spain, I was like, wow, this walking places thing is pretty cool. I want Spain, but I want it in Detroit. And people laughed at me, especially back then. But I moved downtown Detroit, just blocks from where you're staying, in 2003. And I basically haven't driven to work since. But working from home is kind of cheating. But for 15 years, I walked to and from an office every day. And I now live 1 mile from your hotel, and very close to where I started my journey in downtown, with my husband and 6-year-old triplets. I don't like that. Yeah. I get to make jokes now. Like, I'm so Detroit, I mass-produce babies. Assembly line style. 2 girls are going and done. That's not exactly how I felt when I found out, but that's a story for another time. So really quick, City Institute is about helping communities tell their story in order to attract and retain talent, engage and inspire residents, promote small businesses, and build thriving places. And we've grown and changed in our work, and we actually specialize in hosting learning journeys and leadership exchange trips for people from around the country. So many regions have the chamber normally, but some organization that brings a group together and goes on a study trip to another city. So if we have anyone from Wichita or the Twin Cities, you are coming here in October, both of you, and I'm working with both cities to put together 3 days of lessons learned in Detroit. Last year we hosted Tulsa, Cleveland, and Seattle. The previous year, Kansas City, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. We've also had Portland and Cincinnati, all kinds of places. I can go on and on. But many from where you are from. We also go to other cities and work with Chicago, Portland, Vegas, and El Paso, and Akron, and so on, helping them tell their stories to their residents so that we can build all of that stuff that's on this list. Okay, so we're going to do a very short history. You got some of it in this beautiful space that we're in. So first of all, if you notice here on your left is the flag of Detroit. So this talks about a lot of Detroit history. But first, all history is indigenous history. We've had people in the city of Michigan for 10,000 years. And then the Europeans arrived, this is a very short version. A guy named Antoine Cadillac shows up in 1701. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say Cadillac in this building. Is there going to be a lightning strike? I'm not sure, but yes, the French, this French gentleman arrives in 1701 and founds Fort Pontchartrain du Détroit. Pontchartrain was the French Minister of Finance, otherwise known as the guy who paid for the trip, and Détroit meaning the strait or the narrow, because the Detroit River, not a river. It's a strait, and that it connects Lake Erie and Lake St. Clair. Lake St. Clair is not a great lake, but it is a good lake. And if it was in any other state, it would probably be the biggest lake in that state. But poor Lake St. Clair is like right, squished between all these great lakes. Anyway, so then the British take over in 1760, the Americans in 1796. For the locals, or for people living in Max, Colonel Henry Schreiner raised the American flag over our city on July 11th, 1796. And then the city seal is in the center. And it represents the Great Fire of 1805. Every big city had a great fire at some point. We started that. Chicago totally copied off of us, all right? Theirs wasn't until 1871. Everyone always talked about Chicago fire. But ours was 1805. And that's when the plan for Detroit was laid out, like spokes of a wheel. We'll come back to that. But that's what this seal is representing. 2 women with flames behind them. And in Latin it says, Speranos meliora resurgence revitalization, which means we hope for better things, it will arise from the ashes. And I love it because we have literally and figuratively rebuilt ourselves many times in our 300 plus years of existence. And it's why we might stumble or fall down and face challenges, but we're going to get back up every single time. And that's what we're in the midst of doing right now, and we're going to hear about that. And it's something about cars, and here we are. Okay, so you are in, obviously you got to hear some of this history. This is the original Ford Piquette plant. It's not how we think of a large plant today, because that was before the mass production. So 1908, first Model T Ford makes by hand in the Piquette plant. 1908 is also the same year that General Motors becomes a company. 1911, they start mass producing the Model T at the Highland Park plant. Again, you probably saw some of this in the video. 1914, they offer the $5 workday, which doubles that. People are making $2.50 a day, and he says, I'm gonna give people $5. A couple of reasons for that. One, he wanted to retain talent. Huh, that's funny. All these cycles that we do the same, trying to do the same thing today. And then we kind of don't realize it, but there were dozens of car companies in Detroit alone. It was the biggest cool thing. I can build a car. And so he didn't invent the automobile, he didn't invent the assembly line, but by putting them together, he was able to change the world. Because cars before Henry Ford and the Highland Park plant were only for the richest of the rich, like airplanes today. Not just the regular rich, the richest rich. So that would not have led to tons of miles of highways and some of those other things. But making them faster made them more affordable, and then also paying people $5 a day meant that they could eventually afford to buy the product they were making. Okay? So people came from all over the world. We have one of the most diverse populations in America, and have for over 100 years. The largest Arab population outside the Middle East, a large Latino population, Polish and Irish and Italian and Yemeni, and all sorts of things. And so this is the part you don't hear that much about when you talk about Detroit's population. You normally see this graph, and it starts in the 1950s, and you see the decline. And we're going to come back to that. But Detroit's population went from 200,000 people in 1900 to 465,000 by 1910, so doubling in 10 years. And by 1930, it's 1.6 million. Do the math on that. The city proper population increased by 1.2 million people in 20 years. No city had grown that quickly in world history at that time. It's an important part of the story to understand this. This is the context that we even give to locals who have lived here forever, right? Because you can't understand B if you skip over A, right? And so, how and why did our population start to decline? Well, we have 3 months to talk about it, so let's get into it. Okay, now I'll do a short version. First of all, here is the map of Detroit, the city proper today. So that line at the top is 8 Mile Road, which you might have heard. It's literally the dividing line between the city and suburbs, and other things as well. But if you notice the two striped areas in the middle, Highland Park and Hamtramck. Because the Home Rule Act of 1909, this is for me the biggest document to understand Detroit. It's pretty nerdy, but we got some pretty messy nerds in here. But Highland Park was the plant, right? Well, he doesn't want to pay Detroit taxes, and this is the mayor of Detroit. So when the Home Rule Act is passed as a state legislation, it says you can't be annexed unless you vote to be. And you can tax yourself, so you don't got to worry about cooperating with everybody else. And Dodge did that similarly in Hamtramck. So Hamtramck today is 2.1 square miles, and Highland Park is 2.9 square miles. They have their own mayors, city councils, school districts, police, and they are right here in the middle of the city of Detroit. But very quickly, 1,000 Model Ts a day wasn't enough. So then he does it again, and the Rouge factory employs 100,000 people at its peak in Dearborn, where we are today. And so forth and so on. GM's Tech Center in 1952, at 11 Mile Road, which at that time was way out. Now we're building a 26 mile, 28 mile, and still taking over farmland to grow, expand, and sprawl. We kind of invented sprawl. I'm sorry, you're welcome depending on the point of view you're at. But so this is metropolitan Detroit today. And so this is why it all matters, is that today in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County, which made up our tri-county area, we have 131 municipalities. Half of them are under 5 square miles, and they're under no obligation to ever speak to each other. So again, I'm sure in the Midwest we're actually at more of a home rule area compared to like Texas or the South. Like Nashville is 500 square miles. Because they just annexed it. Jacksonville is 747 square miles. The city of Detroit, 139, which there's some rumors out there that that's big, but if you just heard some of those stats, you realize that is not big. We're right in the middle. And so how does that impact things? And how does it impact this population decline? So we have people in, right? And we peak at 1.8 million in 1950. And then we build the highways, and the plants are all being built farther and farther out. So most cities grew concentrically, and we had that. But then as we're growing concentrically, it's boom, a plant, boom, a plant. And then the highways and the spreading out happened a lot sooner than a lot of other communities. It's also why our towns are a little smaller, because we don't need high rises to build cars. We need lots of open space. And so our population declines, but they're moving across the street. They're just in a different city, a different municipality. So the regional population of that 3-county area has stayed pretty much the same at 4 million people since 1950. We just stopped growing in population as a region and kept taking up more land. And that leads to, how does this get to today? Well, you might have seen some headlines like this. Bankruptcy, can't believe it, it's already been 12 years. So this population decline accelerated because of this. Think about every municipality is based on property tax dollars. I want houses so I can get property tax dollars in my community. And I'm going to give you some examples, extreme examples, but examples nonetheless. You might have heard of Grosse Pointe. It's a very affluent suburb. There's been movies and a TV show that use it. There's actually 5 separate Grosse Pointes. There's Grosse Pointe Farms, and Grosse Pointe Shores, and Grosse Pointe Woods, and Grosse Pointe Park, and Grosse Pointe City. All together, they equal 11 square miles. And each one has their own mayor, city council, police, and park department. In fact, they all have beautiful parks right on Lake St. Clair. And if you are in Grosse Pointe Shores, you cannot go to the park in Grosse Pointe Farms. They card you at the gate. There's gates to each of their parks. And not only can Detroiters not go, other Grosse Pointers from 2 blocks away cannot go. Pleasant Ridge, the mayor of Pleasant Ridge, longtime mayor of Pleasant Ridge, the great community leader, is just retiring and stepping down as mayor. Pleasant Ridge is 0.5 square miles. Why? Because of a mayor. So think about it. So we're competing for houses. There's no regional plan to say how many houses we need. And estimates are we overbuilt as a region about 1,000 houses a year above and beyond regional population trends for 50 years. What happens if you build 50,000 houses more than you have people? And not only that, but now you have not only houses, we are going to build our high-rise in our municipality, in our county. So this happened in emergence everywhere, right? And everyone had similar policies, like the Federal Housing Act and the Federal Highway Act. And in other conversations, we get much more into how that impacts Detroit. But we also, you notice, you don't see high-rises in the 70s, 80s, or 90s really in downtown Detroit, because they also were built in the suburbs. So we have little pockets of just that era, downtowns, but that's not downtown, it's all built in sprawl, so they're not walkable at all, in a few of our suburban communities. So we saw this, right? We saw the bankruptcy, so the population decline, tax revenue decline. We've been trying to stay out of bankruptcy for a really long time, and we finally did it in 2013, but it wasn't the end. It was actually the beginning. We were starting to see investment in downtown. We were starting to see a demand to be in Detroit's neighborhoods, but it was really hard to get through that debt that we were holding on to. And so, yes, at this time, when we filed for bankruptcy, though, we had 100 abandoned buildings just in the central business district that you're staying in, including multiple 30-plus story high-rises. We had 40,000 empty houses because what happens when you build more houses, and then there's a housing crisis, and now you have an older house in Detroit, which I would love historic architecture. I can look at it all day. And notice there's its own historic home that takes time, energy, and money to take care of. And so, I can buy a house in the suburbs, newer house, foreclosed pricing, a better school district, and go back a little bit. Detroit loses 30% of its population in 10 years. Recently, in 2000, Detroit still had 1 million residents. By 2010, it's 713,000. And again, mostly too, just across the street or a few miles away. And so, 10 years later, wow, what a difference. Detroit Riverwalk, the best Riverwalk in America, 3 years in a row. 2025, public space, #1 best public space. How about this, world's greatest places? 2022, Detroit. The New York Times, Detroit, one of the world's top places to visit in 2025. We were also on that list in 2022. This is just a newer headline. #1 emerging startup ecosystem, restoration of Detroit's mission to extent. This is just a very small smattering. And you see this, actually. If you think about it, so this I wanted to bring out as an example, because we've renovated all 100 downtown buildings. Does anybody recognize this building? It was built in 1915, abandoned for 30 years. This is what it looks like today. And you are staying in it. This is a Michelin Key Hotel. And one of the upsides, or silver linings to people ignoring us for a long time and not having a lot of investment, is that we also didn't have a huge demand for the land. And so we left abandoned buildings for 30 years instead of tearing many of them down. We lost some good ones, but for the vast majority of them, they're still here for us to renovate into spaces that really stand out, right? And again, we could do a whole architecture tour downtown, and they'll come back for that one, right? So how do we do this? From all that bankruptcy, all that big policy stuff, to all these really great things happening. Well, the bankruptcy again actually helped, right? We instead of having 50% of our streetlights not working, we had the largest number of LED lights in the country. We had the first on that. Some of the big projects that I wish we had more time to talk about, but this is the thing, New Lab in Michigan Central, and if you haven't had a chance to see it, either online or in person, look up online. They actually did to open Michigan Central Station after 30 years of being vacant, with nothing, no windows. It was used in post-apocalyptic movies. That's what it was used for 30 years, okay? It was built in 1913, same architect, same year as Michigan Central Station, or as Grand Central Station, and then the last train left in 1988. And in 2018, Ford Motor Company announced it was going to renovate this, as well as other buildings around it, to be the future of innovation and autonomous mobility for, not just Ford, but for Detroit. And though I could go through a million beautiful building rentals, like the one you're staying in, this one is the most impactful. Because it isn't just a pretty building, which it is. This is what is next for Detroit. Innovation and collaboration, and some really amazing stuff. So New Lab is the building on the left, which was an empty building that had a fire and 30 years empty. The roof had collapsed. So instead of putting a new roof in, they put a skylight. So that's pretty good. If you're not familiar with New Lab, it's in New York and now Detroit. But there's 200 startup companies that operate out of this building. And the idea, and that's from electric motorcycles, this one guy's doing like a shipping container with solar panels so you can put it in a farm and keep things colder sooner, for longer. And they're all right there and helping each other and collaborating on things. And then they can move into Michigan Central. And then they can buy an empty building and renovate that, because we still have a few, but less and less in between. How are we doing on time? And anyway, it's really amazing. And just today, you might have seen if you're watching local news or headlines, but they just announced the hotel Nomad is a high-end hotel brand that is coming to Michigan Central by 2027, which will have hotels, wellness, food and beverage. And if you do have time while you're here, Michigan Central, it's just open to the public. That whole big lobby area, there's a coffee shop and a store and a donut place and a little lounge area where you can just hang out and read a book. But when it opened, they held a 90-minute halftime show, basically. It was Diana Ross, Jack White, Big Sean, Melissa Etheridge, she's not from here, but she did a Bob Seger too. Jelly Roll. I mean, it was like 90 minutes of just Eminem and everybody. And it's actually online, you can check it out. It's a great marketing class too, because in between all these really big artists, Ford gets out there and says, look at what we're doing in innovation and the future of mobility. Anyway, pretty big deal. And then right by there, some upcoming projects as we come back. On your left, you see the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Centennial Park. This is a $75 million park that is opening this fall, just blocks from Michigan Central. And it's connected to Michigan Central by this Joe Louis Greenway, which is a 29-mile greenway connecting Detroit, Island Park, Hamtramck, and Dearborn. And one of the big takeaways from our Riverwalk, which eventually will be 5.5 miles, when this park is opened in the fall, we'll be at like 4.25 miles done, with 6 parks along the way, varying different awesomeness. And the Southwest Greenway goes right from Michigan Central to the waterfront, which had all been industrial. No one had been over there on the west part of the Riverwalk in 100 years. So this is going to be huge. And the Greenway as well. But one of the takeaways that I love from this is you start somewhere, not everywhere. Right? So they didn't wait till they had all 5.5 miles of all money raised They said, oh, we got a little land and a little money, let's make a park along the riverfront. In 2008, the first park opened along the riverfront. And then they had a little more money and a little more space, and then they made another little park that connected the two. And then another one, and then another one, and then so forth and so on. And again, 3 times in a row they've been named #1 Riverwalk, and that's before this $75 million park opens. They're not even putting their name in their hat this year, so some of you guys have a chance of winning in your communities, actually. So if you have time while you're here, I know not much more time left in your stay, but hitting the Riverwalk bike, there's bike share. Our Mogo bike share is 720 bikes and 72 stations, and it really is last mile mobility. Happy to talk more about that on Q&A if anybody wants. So how did we do this? That's what you want to know. So I did a little history, a little about all the cool things going on in Detroit. Now we're going to talk about lessons learned that you can take away. This is the biggest. Growth comes with collaboration. I mentioned that 131 municipalities because it's actually part of what has been a major challenge for so long. The history of division, not just city, suburb, or black, white, or but suburbs amongst each other, right? And this default separation. But what started moving us forward was working together as a region, as a state, right? Having Lansing, where our capital is, be part of Detroit, to connect in Grand Rapids to Detroit, because as goes Detroit, or as goes our cities, so go the rest of our state. We learned that very early on during the Great Recession, right? When we were losing population. But now, Detroit has 2 years in a row gained population for the first time in 50 years. Just a little bit, but hey, we will take it, right? There were estimates in 2010 that had Detroit bottoming out at 500,000 people right around now. We're at 650,000, which I remind people is not a small amount of people. Nobody's left in Detroit. 650,000 people is still a lot of people, you guys. But so collaborating regionally and statewide, also public-private nonprofit partnership. One of the big dominoes to some of this was our 300th birthday in 2001. They formed a committee. We threw a party, Stevie Wonder on the waterfront, amazing. But what's the legacy from that? And you saw relationships had been built across the region and across public, private, and nonprofit. And we saw Campus Marshes Park created as the legacy from our 300th birthday. And if you haven't been there, it's just a couple blocks from your hotel. It was an ugly intersection with 5 streets coming together just 20 years ago. People went, oh, we're going to put a park in the middle of Detroit. Who's going to want to go there? #1 public square in North America, a few different times, and a few different ways. So they're like, wow, when we come together, we can get a lot done. So the Riverwalk, for example, was General Motors, the city of Detroit, and a new nonprofit that was created, the Detroit River Conservancy, and that is how we started with the Riverwalk. After decades of talking about it, every plan from 1960 on had, let's do something really cool on the Riverwalk. But there weren't the relationships, there weren't the collaboration, there wasn't the trust, and that has been a huge part of our revitalization efforts. Another one that I remind every city I work with, assets and challenges are not mutually exclusive. They exist simultaneously, and they do in every city. So I thought this used to be just Detroit, and then people were like, come help me over there. And I was like, oh, wait, what? Chicago, you got all your tours, but they're about architecture downtown. We do a workshop on storytelling for community impacts, and we did it for the 77 neighborhood organizations, right? What is the story of your neighborhood, your city, your place, the assets and the challenges? Everyone mostly knows the challenges. That's what they focus on, right? Oh my God, our place, it's so bad. Oh, this, if you don't understand, these people and that thing, and everyone will go on forever. And it doesn't mean those challenges don't exist, but you actually have to know and appreciate your assets. Because a lot of times those are taken for granted, and locals don't even really know them either. And so that goes to the how do you know what you need if you don't know what you have. And we work with a lot of universities on, they're like, I wish there was a coffee shop in walking distance as a student. Oh, well, here's 10 of them, but maybe you didn't know. Or new faculty, we do tours for new faculty, or the new president who just moved to for example, Wayne State University 2 years ago, automatically a leader in the community. But how do you know how to be a leader and what you can do in a place if you don't know what you have and how you got there? A couple of the programs that we do around attraction and talent, and this is about placemaking really quickly as I wrap up. But mobile talent value quality of place in choosing where they live and work after college. This is really it. Quality of place isn't something you do after you grow the economy and have more resources to do the extras. It's one of the essentials you do in order to grow the economy. A lot of what we invest in public space, how does that attract and retain talent? That's about placemaking. The idea that the place matters, and you have places that you know and appreciate and can quality of life. We do a program called We Can Michigan Rallies, and we literally bring college students to our cities, to Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, more coming, but from an hour away, from 2 hours away, from 20 minutes away, and they see their cities as a grown-up, which they've never seen before. And the parents that come sometimes are like, I lived here my whole life, I didn't know that. And look at the changes, right? 92% say they're more likely to take a job and stay. We're actually part of the job interview process as well for a lot of companies. Increased awareness and feeling more connected. Because, I'll just get to the last part here, that it's actually emotional bonds between people in their communities are elements that relate directly to their daily quality of life and feeling connected that make people want to stay. So on that note, I'll end with this. Answering the question, why Detroit? Why did you guys come here? Why did I start this 20 years ago? Why do we have a future? It's we have all the big city amenities you could possibly imagine. We have 4 major sports teams playing blocks from each other, the second largest theater district in the country. Yes, Cleveland, I counted. We also have that amazing museums, architecture, and parks, but we also have community engagement. People care about Detroit, and they want to do something to make it better. And in Detroit, you can not only start a business like some of these featured here, you can have a positive impact on your community. And we sum that up by saying, Detroit is big enough to matter in the world, and small enough where you can matter in it. And I wouldn't live anywhere else. So, you can stay in touch on all kinds of ways, but let's do questions, comments. I know you're at the end of the night, but there might have been something I touched on you might want to know more of. And we have postcards for you with that quote on it because people really liked it. So does anybody have any questions or comments? There's a microphone if you need it. What do you want? Is someone staying? Oh yeah.
I'd be curious. I'm curious from your vantage point. Our 4 major sports teams. It's model application, but some of them are pretty high in recent years. Is that, especially like the Rams, for example, Tigers are number 1 in Major League Baseball right now. Has that played a role? I mean, it didn't fit into the narrative necessarily here, but from outstate,
yeah, I mean, we hope
a lot of pride in Detroit.
Yes. Well, it also goes to big events, right? So we hosted the NFL draft last year, and we did it. We had a huge, for the same group that planned the 300th birthday and the riverfront, all got together. They were like, this is not just a draft. This is our advertisement to everybody who's watching this. And it works. I mean, we can't tell you how many people both came here and even locals again discovering it. I mean, I always was worried about the Lions doing well because those Lions fans are, even when we were the worst team in football and lost 0-16 in 2008, people were still going to games. So I was like, what's going to happen when we win? Which is very exciting. Absolutely, it brings more people down. And then having it in our downtown, which they didn't used to be. The Lions used to play 45 minutes north than the sea of, service parking lots, and so did the Pistons until just recently. But now people come down and they're walking and they're going to that restaurant and that small business and they're maybe doing a staycation and staying at the Shinola and they're seeing their city in a whole new light. But don't try to get a hotel when there's some of those games in town, right? But absolutely, it's also an asset to our community, right? Being able to, I used to say I could walk. I mean, I can walk to Lions games, Red Wings games, Tigers games, and I don't have to pay for parking, and I don't know what traffic's like. No. Well, maybe I should live downtown. Maybe I could do that and help plant a seed for people over the years. Yes? Yeah, well, there is something to crisis breeds opportunity, crisis breeds innovation, right? There was a little bit, wow, we have to do something. But I also think it was the relationship building, breaking down some of those walls, trying something, building human or community-focused relationships, knowing each other, trusting each other, and being able to work through some of those challenges. And so certainly, and then seeing success. Once you can do it once and you have a proof of concept, basically, and the Riverwalk, the campus marches, and then the Riverwalk, and then the dominoes start to fall, right? You can say, okay, wow, they did that, and that turned out really well. It doesn't mean it's easy. No one's saying that it is easy, and that everybody's kumbaya and gets along perfectly. But when you have those relationships, when you've built them and you have a little trust built up, you can, work through some of those disagreements or difficult times, right? And the idea that, in order to attract and retain, we have to make people want to be in a place. It's not just jobs. And one person that was a big part of that was Dan Gilbert. It doesn't hurt to have a local billionaire jumping into the fray and buying some buildings when a skyscraper sale, he said. But he moved his business downtown from the suburbs because he needed help attracting and retaining talent. Nobody, as mostly tech company he said he was, mortgages and stuff, but but no one wanted to come to an office park in Livonia to work at a tech job. That way they could go anywhere in the world to work at. So this idea that we're all in this together, it took us a while to get there, but that is a big part of why we've moved forward like we have. We have a question here.
Thank you very much. Just listening to you, your enthusiasm, and what really happens. But then you said Ford was still investing, not just in cars, but he was also investing in another area. And then you had someone else investing in another area. And yet I heard you say, for 20 years you've been doing this. What motivated you to be that person? Because one person can do a lot if you're motivated by it. Why did you stay with it for 20 years to see this result?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of that support. The city wasn't supported because they were busy trying to stay out of bankruptcy. We didn't have billionaires investing. I would walk by abandoned buildings on my way to work. But I also loved my life here. That was part of it. I wouldn't mind walking by an empty building to get to the coolest jazz club you've ever been to. And then knowing the owners are, gives questions for free, and, that community sense. But that was why people were like, oh, I'm sorry to live in Detroit. Oh, are you sorry that I live in Detroit? Will you come with me, see my version of Detroit? And it doesn't mean those challenges don't exist, but come hang out with me. Come, it didn't start as this great, it is the crisis for innovation. Nobody else was saying anything good about Detroit. The city wasn't. Our visitors bureau, our convention bureau, lovely, and they've done so much recently, which is great. They were in charge of all 131 suburbs. And all lived in the suburbs, and they would hire me to give tours to people that work for the visitors bureau. Because you couldn't Google stuff. You guys remember this? Most of the people don't remember. We made a list, a really powerful small business tool, is we made a checklist of the 100 bars and restaurants of 2005. Just a simple piece of paper. For the locals, we now have the entire city, it's 987, not counting Jimmy John's and McDonald's. The people go, I've been everywhere, and I go, have you? And because they were small businesses and before Yelp and Facebook and Instagram, people didn't know about it. So basically, I just took what I loved to do, and I made it a job. I very quickly realized the impact it had. I took a man on a tour very early on, and he looked happy the most of the time, and afterwards he was really sad. And I was like, are you okay? How do you enjoy it? Oh, I did. And just kind of sad because I got offered my dream job here, and I turned it down. And now I'm back for a conference, and I took this tour, and I could have my dream job in an amazing place. And I didn't realize it. 2 hours. There's so many things you can't change overnight, but taking people and having them experience a place, meet the people in the community, in the small businesses in the neighborhoods, and just say, hey, this could be your life. And people go, oh, that's actually pretty cool. That's how it all started, I always say I love Detroit, but they love me back. I met my husband on a tour. I got married in the middle of campus marches and invited the whole city. I can't pay for a drink in town, you know, like it's just a really special place. And if you, you know, that's one way you want to do it and keep doing it, even when no one else is doing it with me. Couple more, one more, two more. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, you touched on it a little bit, but where do you see higher ed supporting the work that you're trying to accomplish, given the...
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So obviously we work very closely with higher ed because we do so much around attraction and retention, and higher ed is the space. We also work with higher ed and Wayne State University the most because they are right here in Detroit. But of course, University of Michigan, Michigan State, Segmate, everywhere, especially with this our Michigan Economic Development Corporation created a Chief Growth Office recently. And they are the ones who are working with us to do these statewide things where we take people from different parts of the state to say, maybe maybe you're a Grand Rapids fit, maybe you're a Detroit fit, maybe you're a smaller town fit, like something for everybody. But we also are part of faculty will use us as part of their lessons, right? Anything you can learn in a classroom, you can learn in Detroit, especially with urban planning or the medical school. We help them understand how to work within the community that they're in. You know, sometimes I sum up what we do is how to live somewhere without being a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, you have to understand the place, understand the needs, the challenges, the assets, all of those things. But Wayne State University 12 years ago started a Department of Economic Development. And they had a Vice President of Economic Development. We worked very closely with them. And I was talking a little bit at dinner about the meds and eds philosophy. Yeah, hospitals and universities that are historically left in under-invested areas. Fruit used to just put up their walls, and meds and eds is like, let's work together. And then Detroit is Detroit Medical Center, Henry Ford Health, Wayne State, all blocks from each other. And these are major anchors. And it's hard to move a university, right? So you can become the leader of a revitalization effort in the neighborhood that you are in, right? And with 30,000 students, we are part of the open house. So the parents are like, should my kids go here? We go, yeah, I live here. First person is really important. I live here. I walk here. Here's your coffee shop. And then the new faculty, this is what you need to know, because so many narratives are actually incorrect that we have told ourselves for a long time. But we couldn't be doing it without higher ed, right? At the University of Michigan, you know, it started in Detroit in 1817, and that's when we were the Wild West outpost, so that's where the fight song says champions of the West, because we were the western part of the United States. But if they had stayed in Detroit, that would have been an interesting, you know, what if. But we are very excited to be working with higher eds here, and every community has one, and they are lucky to have all of you, because none of our places exist without higher ed and helping people attract, retain, get jobs, and make our places continue to grow. And this is no caffeine. I'm not allowed to have caffeine and talk about Detroit or I scare people. But thank you so much. I have postcards for you. I know you're on your way out. But we'll also we'd love to stay in touch and talk more about any of your places. I could go to Indianapolis tomorrow. Where are my Indian people? We're going to the Indian people? No? Okay. Let me ask you. We do. Okay. But we'll talk. I'd love to talk more about that. So
colleges and universities in this country are stewards of place. If you've heard that term, you are a steward of place for sure. Let's give it up.
thank you, everybody.